Welcome everyone to this conversation on the political landscape in rural Cambodia. It's quite a ride. The shift we're seeing is both controversial and, deeply concerning.
Absolutely, there's so much to unpack, especially considering how an overt populist style is morphing into what many describe as deeper authoritarianism.
Right. Now, Cambodia has been known for its populist strongman, Hun Sen, whose style relied on gift-giving, promises of stability, and even a bit of terror to secure rural loyalty. But we're now seeing a sort of shedding of that populist skin as the regime tightens its grip.
Exactly, and it's fascinating yet disturbing how this transition is marked by more covert legal measures, political violence, and what feels like a systematic crackdown on dissent.
Yes, what's really striking is the dual track here. The regime is not only using its traditional tools like material incentives to maintain support in the rural areas, but is also adopting legal and extrajudicial measures to stifle any potential opposition.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's dig into those legal changes for a minute. The shifts in laws regarding NGOs, media regulation, and even those broad definitions that allow for disbanding political parties have essentially criminalized dissent.
Right. It's like, think of it as a double-edged sword. On one side, you have those traditional populist tactics, mass patronage and the promise of stability in a post-genocidal society, and on the other, a legal infrastructure aimed at suffocating any opposition that might threaten the regime's control.
Exactly. And the point about the media? Oh man, how independent outlets got muzzled. For instance, shutting down outlets like the Cambodia Daily, closing radio stations, and then even selling off publications to pro-government factions. This is a systematic, way to control the narrative.
Absolutely. It's almost like the government is saying, we won't tolerate any voices that challenge us, and they're doing it very quietly at times, through quiet law changes that come into play just as the threat of opposition begins to reemerge.
Right on. Right. And then there's the chilling residence scenario of opposition figures, the arrest of political opponents in the dead of night, detention without warning, and charges of treason. It paints a vivid picture of a regime that's determined to remold the political landscape completely.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that this move from overt populism to deeper authoritarianism is partly a reaction to the rising discontent among rural communities. These communities, while once reliably supportive, are now facing the severe consequences of land grabbing, logging, and resource extraction.
Exactly. It's like the regime's original promises of stability and material welfare are now overrun by the negatives of unchecked resource extraction and widespread inequality. And now, rural people who once clung to the regime for their basic needs are starting to feel abandoned.
Yeah. It's like, the very foundations that the regime built on, preventing chaos in a post-genocidal society, are now becoming hollow with the loss of genuine support. The article points out that rural activists are creative and resilient, though, even in the darkest of times.
Absolutely. I agree. But here's my slight challenge. While it's indeed clear that the rural landscape is suffering, can we fully say that the shift fully originates from rural discontent? I mean, isn't it also a calculated centralization of power by the leadership?
That's a fair point. And I'd say it's both. There's external pressure from a growing, tired populace, and at the same time, a deliberate recalibration by Hun Sen's government to insulate itself from any dissent.
And what's also interesting is the external context. There's that shifting geopolitical setting, the rise of China's infrastructural investments, and the disengagement by Western powers. It's fueling a kind of strategic emboldenment on the part of the regime.
Right. The article really emphasizes that context. The anti-Western sentiment is being manipulated, and it acts as a sort of rallying cry to frame the opposition as being foreign-influenced. In a way, it's like the regime is saying, we are protecting you from external influences, even though internally we see heavy-handed repression.
And then you have the role of propaganda. From state news apps to new pro-government research institutions, it's all becoming a closed loop, where the only narrative that gets widespread is the one that justifies these authoritarian practices.
Exactly, indeed. The narrative is meticulously crafted to exclude dissent and undermine any independent voices. You can see it in the systematic shutdown of crucial media channels.
Yep. Yeah, it's a bit like tightening the screws. Turn it just enough so that those who think differently, who might rally together, simply don't have a voice anymore.
And, speaking of voices, the story of rural communities is particularly heartbreaking here. The loss isn't just media or political rights. It's about a loss of hope and a loss of connection to their rights over land and resources.
For sure. The piece really paints a picture of how rural life, which once was sustained by genuine political participation and a mutual exchange with the regime, now faces a future where, their social movements are nearly being erased.
Yep. And yet there's a flicker of resilience mentioned. Activists and networks of farmers are, finding ways to stand up even in this very dark time. It reminds me of, stories from other parts of the world where, against all odds, grassroots movements manage to shine through.
Indeed. I like that analogy. It's like even when the lights go out in the big cities, there's always a spark in the rural areas that refuses to die out.
Exactly. It's like they're, plotting some sort of comeback, even if the tools at their disposal, like independent media, are being, co-opted by the authoritarian state.
And to circle back to the upcoming elections, there's a real uncertainty. Will this crackdown just be a short-term reaction before the elections, or does it mark a permanent step into, outright authoritarian control?
That's, the big question. The article leaves us with that sense of foreboding. Like, unless there's some significant change, we're looking at, a new normal that leaves no room for genuine democratic expression.
Right. And in that new normal, we may very well witness the sustained silencing of the people's voice, something that history has shown, is not sustainable in the long run.
True, under such conditions, there's a risk of widespread disenfranchisement and a disconnect between the government and rural people's actual needs. Yet, it also sets the stage for future resistance, a sort of, inherent potential for change, even in the darkest times.
Yep, absolutely. This conversation really makes us think about the role of political stability versus, authoritarian control, and how these dynamics play out in communities with long histories of struggle over land and rights.
Yeah, it's like an ongoing tug-of-war, where traditional populist elements are being discarded in favor of a sanitized yet ruthless form of rule. The irony here is thick. Rural communities that once benefited from, the regime's material support are now paying the ultimate price with their rights and voices.
For sure. And what do you think about the legitimacy of this new approach from the government's perspective? Aren't they, essentially boxing themselves into a corner by stripping away any independent voice that might one day hold them accountable?
That's a thoughtful critique. It might be a short-term win for consolidating power, but in the long term, as we've seen elsewhere, such deep-seated authoritarianism can lead to significant instability. It's a risky tightrope walk. Suppressing dissent might work temporarily, but it undermines the very foundations of trust and social mobility.
Right, exactly. And, considering the global context, with rising international scrutiny and, well, alternative models of governance, it does seem like the regime is paving a perilous path that could eventually backfire.
Yes, indeed. It's a complex interplay. A regime feeding off historical loyalty and patronage while simultaneously shutting down channels for constructive dissent. It's like they're burning the bridges behind them.
That's a powerful metaphor. And it all begs the question, what happens next if the elections confirm this deepened authoritarian approach?
Exactly. That's the cliffhanger here. The uncertainty of whether this is just an election-era crackdown or the onset of an enduring regime change remains palpable. Rural communities, the guardians of land rights and local voice, now stand at a crossroads.
Indeed. In such scenarios, the resilience of grassroots movements might be the only beacon of hope. Even if the authoritarian veil covers everything today, history shows that, the desire for true representation can spark significant movements.
Absolutely. And that potential, though currently muted, may eventually come back strong when people decide they no longer wish to live in the dark under propaganda and coercion.
Right, exactly. This has been an eye-opening discussion about an uneasy balance between state power and rural resilience, and it really highlights the precarious future of political participation in Cambodia.
Indeed, while the present appears bleak, the inherent human drive for accountability might still find a way to shine through. Thanks for this deep dive. It's been quite enlightening.
Absolutely.